There are moments in life when injustice sits so quietly beside us that it almost feels permanent. You walk through your days carrying wounds. No one applauded you for surviving. Words were spoken about you in rooms you never entered. Plans were drawn that assumed your weakness would last forever. And perhaps the most painful part was not what they did, but how confidently they did it, as though the universe itself had agreed with them. Yet there is a strange law woven into creation. Pride always overplays its hand. Evil grows loud when it believes it has won, and that is usually the precise moment when God steps forward, not with thunder first, but with timing. God does not rush humiliation, because rushed justice teaches nothing. He allows arrogance to climb high enough that its fall can be seen from every direction. Your enemies thought silence meant permission. They mistook your restraint for surrender. They assumed that because you did not defend yourself, no defense existed. But there is a difference between being quiet and being abandoned. Heaven was not ignoring your pain, it was recording it. And every act done against you was added to a ledger that does not forget. Public humiliation is never God's first language, but it becomes his response when correction is refused. Private warnings were ignored, gentle chances to repent were dismissed, and so what was once hidden must now be revealed. Not because God delights in shame, but because truth must eventually stand in the open where lies once thrived. Your enemies work carefully to protect their image. They polished their reputation while damaging yours. They believed control over perception meant control over reality. They were wrong. There is a peculiar justice in exposure. When light enters a room long kept dark, it feels violent to those who live comfortably in shadow. What you endured quietly, they will now face loudly. What they mocked you for surviving will become the very thing that unmasks them. God has a way of using the same stage they used against you to reveal who they truly are. The applause they sought will turn into silence. The allies they relied on will begin to question, and the confidence they displayed will fracture under the weight of truth. Do not mistake this moment as revenge. Revenge is driven by anger. Divine humiliation is driven by order. It restores balance where imbalance ruled too long. It teaches observers what pride costs. It warns others who planned similar harm. And it frees you, not by forcing you to speak, but by allowing reality to speak on your behalf. You will not need to explain. You will not need to defend. When God acts publicly, explanations become unnecessary. There is also mercy hidden within this exposure, for humiliation can become a doorway to repentance if they choose humility afterward. But whether they soften or harden is no longer your concern. Your role was never to punish. Your role was to endure without becoming what hurt you, and you did. That endurance has weight, it has meaning, it has been seen. So when the tables turn, do not be surprised if it feels unreal. Justice often arrives quietly before it announces itself. One day you will notice people speaking differently, stories changing, silence replacing accusations. And in that moment, remember this: God did not humiliate them to elevate you. He humiliated falsehood to restore truth. Your elevation is simply the natural result of standing where truth eventually lands. Stay still. Stay clean in heart. Let what is unfolding complete its work. What is about to happen does not need your interference. It needs only your patience. There is a misunderstanding that has followed you for a long time, and it lives in the minds of those who watched you remain quiet when you had every reason to speak. They believed silence meant defeat. They assumed that because you did not defend yourself loudly, you had no defense at all. But silence, when chosen rather than forced, is not emptiness. It is preparation. It is the pause before order asserts itself. While they were narrating their version of events, God was shaping reality itself, patiently aligning circumstances beyond human manipulation. Silence unsettles those who thrive on reaction. Your enemies needed noise from you to validate their actions. They wanted anger, explanation, collapse, anything that would confirm their superiority. When none came, they filled the void with arrogance. They spoke more, they pushed further, they exposed their intentions without realizing it, and in that quiet stretch of time, something irreversible began to form. God was not idle. He was constructing a response too precise to rush. There is a kind of justice that only silence can invite. Loud defense often muddies truth. Restraint purifies it. By not fighting back in the way they expected, you allowed their behavior to stand alone, unchallenged, visible, and unmasked. Every lie required repetition. Every manipulation required maintenance. And the longer you remained steady, the heavier their performance became. Silence removes distractions. It forces reality to speak for itself. This is why God often instructs the innocent to wait rather than retaliate. Waiting is not passive when it is anchored in trust. It is an act of obedience that transfers the burden of response from human limitation to divine authority. You did not surrender your voice. You entrusted your case. And in doing so, you stepped out of the arena where truth is distorted and into a higher court where nothing needs exaggeration. Silence also preserved you. Had you fought every accusation, you would have sorbed their poison into your spirit. You would have been shaped by the very injustice you were trying to escape. Instead, your restraint kept your character intact. While they were busy proving something to others, you were being protected from becoming something you were not. God values this preservation more than immediate vindication. There is also timing woven into silence. Justice revealed too early can be dismissed as coincidence. Justice revealed after patience looks like inevitability. When God allows events to unfold without interruption, patterns emerge, witnesses notice, stories contradict themselves. The truth gains weight simply by remaining unchanged, and when exposure finally comes, it does not arrive as an argument, it arrives as recognition. Your silence confused them because it did not behave like weakness. It did not shrink you, it did not isolate you, it did not destroy you. Instead, it stabilized you. And stability is threatening to those who rely on chaos to maintain control. That is why they escalated. They thought pressure would provoke you into breaking your quiet. They never realized that the silence was not fragile, it was fortified. Now that justice is approaching, understand this clearly. What God built in silence cannot be undone by noise. The foundation was laid where no interference was possible. When truth emerges, it will not need your voice to support it. The same silence they mocked will become the reason no one can deny what is happening. There is a dangerous illusion created by time when consequences do not arrive immediately. It convinces the guilty that they are safe, clever, or justified. Your enemies looked at the delay and assumed approval. They interpreted the absence of instant judgment as proof that nothing would happen. But patience is not agreement. Delay is not dismissal. God often withholds response, not to excuse behavior, but to expose it fully. Patience reveals intention. When people believe they will never be held accountable, they stop pretending. Restraint fades. Masks slip. What began as subtle harm becomes open arrogance. What was once whispered becomes bold. This is not accidental. God allows room for choice so that responsibility cannot be disputed later. When judgment finally arrives, it answers not one action but a pattern. Your enemies believed they had outsmarted consequences. They counted days, months, maybe years, and nothing happened. Confidence grew. Mockery followed. They spoke as though time itself had taken their side. But time does not protect wrongdoing, it records it. Every unchecked act becomes evidence. Every repeated offense strengthens the case. God's patience simply allows the record to become complete. There is mercy in delay, though it is rarely recognized as such. The pause between wrongdoing and judgment is an invitation to stop, to reflect, to correct. Many are warned quietly before they are corrected publicly. Your enemies were given chances they ignored, signs they dismissed, discomfort they blamed on others. Each ignored warning narrowed the path toward exposure. Patience also protects the innocent from premature outcomes. Had judgment arrived earlier, it would have been smaller, quieter, easier to dismiss. By waiting, God ensures that what unfolds cannot be minimized or rewritten. When justice comes after long patience, it feels earned, not cruel. Observers understand, they see the build-up, they recognize the cause. Your enemies mistook survival for victory. They assumed that because nothing collapsed immediately, everything was secure. But structures built on harm always depend on continued pressure to stand. Once God removes his patience, even slightly, those structures fail quickly. What looked stable reveals itself as fragile. What seemed remanent unravels fast. The most unsettling part for them will not be the humiliation itself, but the realization that it was always approaching, that every moment of confidence was borrowed time, that the delay they celebrated was the very thing that made their fall unavoidable. God does not hurry judgment because hurried judgment can be argued with. Delayed judgment speaks for itself. You were never forgotten during the waiting. Patience was not indifference, it was strategy. And when the shift happens, it will be clear that nothing was accidental. Not the silence, not the delay, not the outcome that is now forming beyond their control. Pride has a peculiar appetite. It never knows when to stop. When left unchecked, it grows louder, bolder, more reckless, convinced that height equals safety. Your enemies were not stopped early because stopping them early would have taught nothing. A small correction is easily dismissed. A quiet warning can be reframed. But when pride is permitted to ascend fully, when it is allowed to display its full arrogance, its collapse becomes undeniable. God understands this principle deeply. He does not interrupt pride too soon because premature interruption hides its true nature. As their confidence increased, so did their visibility. They spoke more freely. They acted more openly. They stopped concealing motives. What once required secrecy began to demand attention. Pride always wants witnesses. It wants admiration, agreement, applause. And in seeking those things, it exposes itself. God allows this exposure because truth needs no force, only light. The higher pride climbs, the more light it attracts, and the clearer its flaws become. There is also a lesson embedded in height. When someone falls from a low place, it is dismissed as misfortune. When they fall from a high place, it is recognized as consequence. The fall becomes a message, it wa. RNS others who attempted to follow the same path. It dismantles the illusion that power protects wrongdoing. God uses elevation not as reward, but as preparation for revelation. Your enemies believed their rise validated them. They assumed growth meant endorsement. They confused expansion with righteousness. But God often allows people to rise for reasons unrelated to approval. Height can serve exposure just as effectively as obscurity. From above, every movement is seen, every inconsistency is magnified, every weakness becomes harder to hide. Pride thinks altitude equals immunity. In reality, it increases vulnerability. This is why their downfall will not be private. Private correction was possible earlier. Public instruction is required now. Their behavior influenced others. Their confidence misled observers. Their example distorted truth. So the correction must be equally visible. God restores balance not only for the wounded, but for those who were watching silently, unsure of what to believe. There is precision in this process. Pride collapses under its own weight. God does not need to push hard. He simply removes support. The lies stop being reinforced. The allies step back. The image fractures. What remains is reality, unprotected, unpolished, exposed. And when it happens, explanations will sound hollow. Justifications will fail. The fall will speak clearly enough. This exposure will also clarify something for you. You will see that the delay was not disregard, it was design. Their pride needed room to fully reveal itself, so that when justice arrived, it would be recognized as necessary, not excessive. You were spared from being the instrument of correction. God reserved that role for reality itself. The height they reached was not stolen from you. It was borrowed against a debt they could not repay. And when the fall completes its work, it will stand as evid. Hence that pride is not strength, it is simply weakness that has not yet been tested. There is a quiet fear that settles into the heart when wrongdoing goes unchallenged. It whispers that what happened did not matter. That silence erased significance. That absence of witnesses equals absence of justice. But this fear is built on a false assumption, that human awareness defines truth. It does not. There is a record deeper than memory, more accurate than testimony, and untouched by manipulation. Nothing done against you vanished simply because no one spoke up. Hidden acts rely on invisibility. They assume that darkness dissolves accountability. But secrecy does not erase actions. It only delays confrontation. Every moment you were wronged without acknowledgement added weight to a ledger that does not forget details. Tone, timing, intent, all preserved. God does not require witnesses to validate harm. He requires truth, and truth exists independently of recognition. Your enemies counted on isolation. They believed that because you were alone in your suffering, nothing would follow. They assumed that silence meant disappearance, but silence is not absence, it is storage. What is stored patiently accumulates power. God allows hidden harm to remain unaddressed temporarily, so that when it surfaces, it does so with clarity and authority. There is also justice in accuracy. Immediate confrontation often simplifies events. It compresses complexity into arguments. But when actions are recorded rather than debated, they retain their original shape. There is no need for exaggeration or defense. The truth stands intact. God preserves details not to shame unnecessarily, but to ensure precision. Justice loses nothing in waiting. You may have questioned whether restraint cost you protection. It did not. It protected you from being misunderstood, from being misrepresented as reactive or unstable, from being reduced to a moment instead of recognized as a pattern of integrity. While no human defended you, something more reliable did. God's awareness is not influenced by popularity, power, or persuasion. Hidden wrongdoing often feels emboldened by time. Perpetrators relax. They assume forgetfulness equals forgiveness. They repeat behavior. They refine tactics. Each repetition adds clarity to the record. What began as a single incident becomes undeniable evidence of character. God allows this repetition because it removes all ambiguity. When exposure arrives, it cannot be framed as misunderstanding. There is comfort in knowing that nothing was lost, no tear wasted, no humiliation overlooked, no quiet endurance dismissed. Even what you struggled to articulate was understood fully. God records not only actions but impact, not only words but intention, not only events but aftermath. This is why justice, when it comes, will feel comprehensive rather than random. You were not abandoned in your silence, you were documented. And documentation changes everything. It means that when truth emerges, it will do so with completeness. Nothing missing, nothing misinterpreted, nothing requiring your effort to explain. The record already exists, waiting for the moment when it must be revealed. Exposure feels sudden to those who experience it, but in truth, it is the final chapter of a long, quiet process. Long before anything becomes public, mercy is offered privately. Correction is whispered before it is announced. God's nature is not impulsive. He does not rush to shame. He waits, not because wrongdoing is small, but because repentance is still possible. Exposure is never his first move. It is his last. Your enemies were not unaware that something was wrong. Conscience speaks even when people pretend not to hear it. There were moments when they felt uneasy, moments when the harm they caused flickered briefly across their awareness. Those moments were invitations, chances to stop, opportunities to reverse course without consequence. Mercy often arrives disguised as discomfort. They ignored it. God allows time because time reveals whether a person will choose humility when no one is watching. Private conviction is the truest test of character. When someone refuses to correct themselves in secret, public correction becomes necessary, not to satisfy anger, but to protect truth. Mercy rejected does not disappear, it transforms into accountability. This is why exposure feels severe to the guilty. They forget the warnings. They forget the inner resistance they silenced. They forget the opportunities they dismissed. By the time truth surfaces, they convince themselves it came without reason. But nothing arrives unannounced in the spiritual realm. Every exposure is preceded by countless moments of restraint. There is also protection in delayed exposure. If God revealed everything immediately, the innocent would be overwhelmed by chaos. Relationships would fracture constantly. Trust would be impossible. Mercy stabilizes the world. It allows space for growth, change, reflection. But mercy has boundaries. When harm becomes habitual, when pride replaces reflection, delay becomes dangerous. Exposure then becomes an act of preservation. Your enemies crossed that boundary quietly, not in one dramatic act, but through repeated refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing. Each ignored nudge hardened their posture. Each dismissed warning increased distance from humility. God watched this progression patiently, not as a passive observer, but as a just guardian, allowing freedom to reveal intention. Exposure also serves those who were harmed. Had it happened earlier, you might have been blamed, misunderstood, or dismissed as reactive. Delay ensured clarity. It allowed patterns to form. It removed doubt. When truth finally emerges, it does so without needing your defense. That is mercy for you as well. God's timing protects dignity where possible and corrects publicly only when necessary. Your enemies forced that necessity. They chose persistence over repentance. They chose image over integrity. And once that choice is made repeatedly, concealment becomes complicity. Exposure becomes the only remaining language. Understand this. Exposure is not cruelty. It is truth finally freed from restraint. Mercy was offered quietly. It was refused repeatedly. What follows is not sudden. It is inevitable, and inevitability carries a weight that cannot be argued away. There is a precision to justice that often goes unnoticed until it unfolds. Exposure is not random. It is contextual. God does not reveal wrongdoing in irrelevant places. He reveals it where it matters most. The same platforms your enemies use to damage you will become the platforms that expose them. This is not coincidence. It is correction aligned with impact. They chose specific spaces to act, specific audiences to impress, specific narratives to control. Harm was not accidental, it was strategic. And because it was strategic, its exposure must be equally deliberate. Justice that appears in unrelated contexts can be dismissed. Justice that appears on the same stage cannot. There is something deeply unsettling about truth surfacing where lies once thrived. It dismantles credibility instantly. Observers remember the confidence, the certainty, the authority with which falsehood was presented. When truth replaces that narrative in the same environment, it does not need emphasis. Contrast does the work. Your enemies believe control over the stage meant control over the story. They curated perception carefully. They assumed that because they owned the microphone, they owned reality. But stages do not belong to those who occupy them temporarily. They belong to truth eventually. God allows misuse of platforms only until they become instruments of correction. This kind of exposure also restores balance for witnesses. People who doubted you silently will recognize what they overlooked. People who believed the lies will feel the shift internally before they acknowledge it externally. Confusion will spread, not about you, but about them. The authority they enjoyed will weaken because authority depends on trust. There is also justice in familiarity. Being exposed in unfamiliar spaces feels distant. Being exposed where one felt powerful feels devastating. God uses this not to humiliate for pleasure, but to dismantle false confidence completely. Pride rooted in visibility must be corrected visibly. Anything less would leave remnants intact. You will notice how quickly narratives change when exposure happens on the same stage. Defenses crumble faster. Excuses sound hollow. Support evaporates. The environment itself becomes hostile to deception because memory lingers there. People remember what was said before. They compare it to what is now revealed. This alignment also removes your burden entirely. You are not required to redirect attention or seek new audiences. The truth arrives where attention already exists. That is why your silence remains powerful even after exposure. You do not need to point anything out. The stage does it for you. God's justice is not only about correction, it is about reversal. What was once used to diminish you will now validate you without your participation. The same visibility that amplified harm will amplify truth. And when that happens, there is no escape through relocation, rebranding, or denial. The record is attached to the place where the harm occurred. Nothing about this is accidental. The stage was chosen long before. The exposure occurred. And when truth steps into that space, it will not announce itself loudly. It will simply stand where lies once stood and remain. Confidence built on truth is quiet and steady. Confidence built on reputation is loud, defensive, and fragile. Your enemies did not stand on integrity, they stood on perception. They invested in how things looked, not in how things were. As long as reputation remained intact, confidence felt justified. But reputation is a surface structure. It cannot support weight when truth steps onto it. For a long time, they borrowed certainty from applause, agreement, and silence. Every nod strengthened the illusion. Every unchallenged lie reinforced belief in their own invincibility. But reputation requires constant maintenance. It demands energy, reinforcement, repetition. Truth requires none of that. It simply exists, waiting. And when truth finally enters the space, reputation begins to dissolve almost instantly. The collapse will not happen all at once. At first, there will be confusion. The confidence they once displayed so easily will hesitate. Words will slow. Defenses will increase. Explanations will multiply. These are the early signs. When truth replaces reputation, certainty disappears, because certainty was never rooted in reality to begin with. They will begin to doubt their own footing. What makes this collapse profound is that it happens internally before it becomes visible. Confidence cracks first in private. Sleeplessness, irritation, overreaction, a growing awareness that something no longer adds up. They will sense that control is slipping even before they can identify why. Truth does not announce itself, it destabilizes. Their confidence depended on being believed. Once belief wavers, everything shakes. Even supporters who remain outwardly loyal will behave differently. Their tone will change, their enthusiasm will fade. Trust is subtle when it erodes, but its absence is unmistakable to the one losing it. The confidence that once filled rooms will feel thin, strained, rehearsed. Reputation can shield a person from consequences for a while, but it cannot protect them from exposure. When truth replaces reputation, confidence has nowhere to anchor itself. Every previous success feels suspicious. Every past statement invites re-evaluation. They will begin to fear their own history because history no longer supports the story they told. This is why truth is so threatening to those who relied on image. It removes certainty without confrontation. No argument is needed, no accusation required. Reality itself becomes the challenger. Confidence that once looked effortless will start to feel performative. The cracks will show in moments they cannot control. You will notice the shift, not in dramatic confession, but in hesitation, in inconsistency, in the subtle retreat from spaces where they once dominated. Truth has a way of shrinking false confidence until it cannot sustain itself publicly. And when it finally collapses, observers will recognize that what looked like strength was simply reputation left untested. False accusations are often crafted carefully. They are meant to redirect attention, confuse perception, and preempt suspicion. Your enemies accused you not because you were guilty, but because accusation is a powerful distraction. It creates noise where silence might invite scrutiny. But accusations have a strange property. They leave trails, and trails eventually lead back to the source. When someone accuses persistently, they reveal more than they intend. Patterns form, motives surface, inconsistencies appear. Over time, what was meant to obscure truth begins to outline it. The words they used against you will be remembered, recorded, and revisited. Not as attacks, but as CL. US. Accusations are risky because they assume permanence of control. They assume that context will never change, but context always changes. New information emerges, perspectives shift. And when that happens, old accusations are re-examined. What once sounded convincing begins to feel excessive. What felt justified begins to feel strategic. Observers start asking questions, not about you, but about why the accusations were necessary in the first place. The reversal is precise. The same language they use to define you will be applied to them, not intentionally but naturally. Behavior will mirror words. Actions will confirm suspicions. And suddenly, those past accusations will feel prophetic in an unintended way. What they described will align more closely with their own conduct than with yours. This is not poetic justice. It is logical consequence. Accusations reveal values. They expose fears. They indicate what someone is trying hardest to hide. When the truth begins to surface, those accusations become reference points. People remember them. They compare them to new evidence. And comparison changes everything. There is also a psychological weight to this reversal. To see one's own words return as evidence is destabilizing. It strips authority. It forces confrontation with self-image. They will attempt to distance themselves from their own statements. But language does not forget easily, especially when it was spoken with confidence. You will not need to remind anyone. The accusations are already stored in memory, conversation, and record. When the moment arrives, they will resurface organically, not as attacks, but as confirmations, and what once harmed you will now clarify the truth. This reversal will feel quiet, almost understated. No dramatic announcement, just recognition spreading slowly. The realization that the story never aligned, that the accusation said more about the accuser than the accused. And in that realization, credibility shifts permanently, without your involvement, without your defense, without your voice being required at all. Revenge is driven by emotion. It reacts. It seeks relief more than resolution. But what is unfolding here is not reaction. It is correction. Moral order is not restored through retaliation. It is restored through alignment. When wrong is allowed to masquerade as right for too long, reality itself becomes distorted. God does not humiliate to satisfy anger. He humbles to reset what has been bent out of shape. Your enemies assumed that humiliation would be your desire because humiliation was their weapon. They believed exposure would feel like vengeance to you because they cannot imagine justice without bitterness. But divine correction operates on a different plane. It is not personal, it is structural. It repairs what arrogance damaged. It reestablishes boundaries that pride ignored. And it does so publicly only because the damage itself was public in effect, even if secret in execution. Moral order depends on consequence, not immediate consequence, but appropriate consequence. When people harm others without repercussion, observers absorb a dangerous lesson that power outruns truth. God intervenes not only for the wounded, but for the witnesses. Public correction teaches that wrongdoing is not sustainable, no matter how long it appears successful. It restores confidence in justice itself. Humiliation in this sense is not degradation, it is exposure to reality. It removes false elevation. It brings someone back to scale. Pride inflates identity beyond truth. Correction deflates it back into proportion. That process feels humiliating only to those who refused humility when it was offered privately. What they experience as shame is simply reality reasserting itself after being ignored. This restoration is also protective. It prevents repetition. When wrongdoing is corrected quietly after causing widespread harm, it invites imitation. When it is corrected visibly, it creates caution. God does not correct publicly to embarrass. He corrects publicly to stabilize. He restores clarity so that others do not stumble into the same deception. You may notice that this kind of humiliation does not elevate you aggressively. There is no dramatic reversal where you stand over them in triumph. That would still distort order. Instead, balance returns quietly. Truth regains weight. Integrity becomes valuable again. Your vindication emerges naturally because falsehood no longer crowds it out. Moral order also restores meaning to suffering. When injustice goes uncorrected, pain feels pointless. When correction arrives, pain gains context, not justification, but understanding. You are not weak for enduring. You are aligned with a process larger than immediate comfort, and that alignment matters. This is why God handles exposure himself. Human revenge often overshoots. Divine correction is exact. It addresses the wrong without corrupting the innocent. You are not required to become cruel to see justice done. You are not asked to mirror harm. Moral order is restored without asking you to lose yourself. Public humiliation, then, is not the goal. It is the byproduct of truth standing where falsehood once stood. It is reality reclaiming space. And when that happens, order returns quietly, firmly, and permanently. Explanation is usually demanded when truth is unclear, when events are incomplete, when stories compete. But when reality presents itself fully, explanation becomes unnecessary. Words are tools for persuasion. Reality is proof. God is removing you from the exhausting role of interpreter because interpretation is no longer required. For a long time you may have rehearsed de-explanations in your mind. What you would say if asked. How you would defend yourself if given the chance. But those explanations were never meant to be delivered. They were survival mechanisms, ways to hold on to clarity while confusion surrounded you. Now, clarity is no longer internal only. It is becoming external. When reality speaks, it does not argue. It demonstrates. Patterns align. Timelines make sense. Behavior confirms what was once only suspected. People connect dots on their own. And when they do, they trust the conclusion more deeply because it was not handed to them. It was discovered. This is also why silence remains important even now. Speaking prematurely can dilute impact. When you explain, others may frame the truth as opinion. When you allow reality to unfold, it becomes undeniable. God is protecting the authority of truth by removing your voice from the equation. There is relief in this. Explaining is exhausting because it places responsibility for understanding on you. God is lifting that burden. Understanding is shifting to the observer. Recognition is becoming internal rather than argued. And internal recognition lasts longer. You may notice people approaching you differently, asking fewer questions, making more statements. Their tone will change because their certainty has changed. Not because you convinced them, but because something became clear. That clarity will feel almost anticlimactic. No dramatic confrontation, no vindictive moment, just a quiet shift where things make sense. Reality speaking also protects you from being misunderstood again. Words can be twisted, intentions misread, silence cannot. When events align without your commentary, there is nothing to misquote, nothing to reinterpret. Truth arrives intact. This process also preserves your dignity. You are not required to relive pain to prove it existed. You are not asked to purr. Form, suffering for validation. Reality does not need your wounds displayed. It carries its own evidence. There is also wisdom in restraint. When reality speaks, those who were wrong are forced to listen, not to you, but to what they can no longer deny. That confrontation is deeper. It bypasses defensiveness. It settles where excuses cannot reach. You will know the moment explanation becomes unnecessary. It feels like release, like standing down from a battle you were never meant to fight. Words fall away naturally, and what remains is truth, standing on its own, speaking in a language no one can interrupt. Support built on illusion is loyal only to comfort. As long as belief requires no effort, people remain aligned. But when truth enters quietly and begins rearranging facts, support weakens, not dramatically at first, but subtly. The shift begins internally, a hesitation, a pause before agreement, a discomfort that did not exist before. People rarely abandon falsehood loudly. They drift away once belief becomes inconvenient. Those who once defended your enemies did so because the story was simple. It required no investigation, no moral risk, no personal cost. Supporting them felt safe. But truth complicates comfort. It introduces tension. Questions arise that cannot be ignored. And once questions exist, certainty collapses. People begin re-evaluating not only the narrative, but their role in sustaining it. Withdrawal often begins as distance, less enthusiasm, fewer public endorsements, reduced presence in shared spaces. These supporters will not announce their doubt. Doubt announces itself through absence. They will stop repeating talking points, stop defending behavior, stop engaging in arguments on their behalf. Silence replaces advocacy. This withdrawal is not driven by loyalty to truth at first. It is driven by self-preservation. People sense when alignment with someone becomes risky. They feel reputational danger. They notice shifts in public perception, and once association threatens their own image, support becomes negotiable. God allows this process because it reveals the fragility of alliances built on deception. Your enemies will feel this loss acutely, not because they valued the supporters deeply, but because support validated identity. It reinforced confidence. It confirmed superiority. When that reinforcement weakens, insecurity emerges. They will attempt to regain control through explanation, blame, or renewed performance. But withdrawal cannot be reversed. Once doubt takes root, supporters also experience an internal reckoning. Some will recognize that they defended harm unknowingly. Others will realize they ignored signs they should have questioned. This awareness brings discomfort. To avoid it, they step back. Distance becomes a way to escape responsibility without confrontation. God allows this quiet unraveling because it prevents chaos. Loud betrayals would shift focus away from truth and toward drama. Silent withdrawal keeps attention where it belongs, on reality itself. The story corrects itself without spectacle. You may observe this change indirectly. Conversations will reference uncertainty. People will speak cautiously. Names once spoken confidently will be mentioned with hesitation. And in that hesitation, authority dissolves. Support that once felt solid reveals itself as conditional. This withdrawal also protects you. It prevents new harm. It reduces the reach of false narratives. As support thins, the ability to manipulate perception weakens. God removes reinforcement so truth can stand without interference. Eventually, your enemies will realize they are standing alone, not suddenly, but undeniably. The crowd did not turn hostile, it simply left. And that absence speaks louder than opposition ever could. Applause is intoxicating because it creates the illusion of permanence. It convinces people that approval is earned, stable, deserved. Your enemies grew accustomed to affirmation. They measured worth by reaction. They assumed silence would never replace celebration. But applause depends on belief, and belief dissolves quietly when truth arrives. Silence is unsettling to those who depend on attention. It removes feedback. It creates uncertainty. It forces self-awareness. When applause fades, the absence feels louder than criticism ever did. Distance replaces warmth. Neutrality replaces admiration. And what NCE felt secure begins to feel exposed. This transition does not happen through confrontation. People do not gather to announce disappointment. They simply disengage. Applause requires energy. Distance conserves it. Once belief weakens, people stop investing effort. Silence becomes the natural response. Your enemies will attempt to reclaim applause. Louder statements, stronger performances, more exaggerated confidence. But desperation repels where certainty once attracted. The more they try to restore reaction, the more obvious the loss becomes. Applause cannot be forced. It must be believed. Distance also protects observers. People step back to avoid being associated with uncertainty. They do not want to be seen clapping at the wrong moment. Silence becomes a shield. And in that silence, the illusion of influence collapses. This loss of applause is not punishment, it is exposure. It reveals what approval was built on. Genuine respect does not vanish overnight. Manufactured admiration does. God allows applause to fade, so reality can be felt without distortion. You may notice how quickly spaces change. Rooms that once echoed with agreement become quiet. Conversations become brief. Engagement becomes minimal. Distance spreads not out of hostility, but out of awareness. Silence becomes the dominant language. For your enemies, this silence will feel disorienting. Without affirmation, they must confront themselves. Without applause, identity feels unstable. They may interpret silence as betrayal, but it is simply truth settling in. Distance also removes leverage. Applause once empowered influence. Silence neutralizes it. When people stop reacting, control dissolves. The stage becomes empty even if the performer remains. This shift restores balance. Attention returns to what matters. Noise fades. Reality stands uninterrupted. And in that stillness, the truth does not need volume. Silence carries it fully. What once felt like dominance will feel irrelevant. What once commanded reaction will meet indifference. And indifference is the clearest signal that illusion has ended. There is a quiet exhaustion that comes from always preparing to defend yourself. Even when you do not speak, part of you remains alert, ready for attack, bracing for misunderstanding. God's justice does something deeply restorative here. It removes you from that posture entirely, not gradually but decisively. You are no longer positioned as a participant in conflict. You are released from the role of responder. This is difficult to accept at first because human instinct equates justice with engagement. We are taught that to be cleared, we must argue; to be understood, we must explain; to be vindicated, we must confront. But divine justice does not operate by debate, it operates by alignment. When God steps in, He does not ask you to sharpen your voice, He asks you to step back. Freedom begins the moment you realize you are no longer responsible for managing perception. That burden quietly lifts. You stop scanning conversations for threats. You stop rehearsing replies. You stop monitoring reactions. Not because you have become careless, but because your involvement is no longer required. Justice has moved beyond human negotiation. This kind of freedom is unsettling at first. It feels passive, almost irresponsible. There is a temptation to reinsert yourself, to clarify, to add context, to help the truth along, but every attempt to intervene weakens the process. God's justice works precisely because it is uncontaminated by emotion, defensiveness, or urgency. It stands on its own authority. Notice how peace returns not through resolution, but through disengagement. You are not vindicated by winning an argument. You are vindicated by no longer needing one. When truth is act. Your silence is not absence, it is confirmation. It signals confidence, not defeat. It communicates that something larger is at work. This freedom also protects your character. Fighting often reshapes us in subtle ways. Tone hardens, compassion thins, identity becomes reactive. God's justice frees you from becoming what hurt you. You are not asked to absorb bitterness, to see fairness restored. You are not required to mirror aggression to be cleared. You remain intact. There is also dignity in this kind of release. You are not dragged into spectacle. You are not positioned as a rival. You are not forced into comparison. Justice unfolds without placing you in the center of conflict. You are spared exposure while truth does its work. That is mercy. You may feel moments of restlessness, an urge to speak, to correct, to explain. Let it pass. That urge belongs to an older season where silence felt dangerous. This is different. Silence is now supported by reality. You are not alone in it. God's justice also removes urgency. You no longer need to rush clarity. You are not racing against lies. Time is no longer working against you. It is working for you. That shift alone frees the nervous system. It allows breath to return. It allows life to resume without constant vigilance. In this freedom, you begin to live again without reference to those who harmed you. Their reactions lose relevance. Their opinions lose weight. Your days stop orbiting around their behavior. That is true release, not when they apologize, not when they suffer, but when they no longer occupy space in your decisions. God's justice does not just correct the past, it liberates the present. And it does so without asking you to carry weapons, arguments, or explanations. You are free because the burden was never yours to carry. Exposure carries two truths at once, and most people only see one. They see judgment. The consequences, the loss of standing, the unraveling of control. But beneath that is something quieter and far more serious. Exposure is the last open door, not to escape consequence, but to choose humility before consequence becomes identity. God does not expose lightly. By the time truth becomes public, every private option has already been offered. Warnings were felt, convictions were stirred, chances were present. Exposure arrives only when a person has repeatedly chosen pride over reflection. It is not sudden, it is accumulated. Judgment in this form is not destruction, it is revelation. It removes the lies a person used to avoid themselves. It strips away distractions. It forces confrontation with reality, not as accusation, but as mirror. This is why exposure is terrifying, not because of what others see, but because the individual can no longer look away. At the same time, exposure remains merciful. It does not seal fate, it clarifies it. It asks a final question: Will you bow or will you harden? Repentance after exposure is still possible, but it is different. It requires surrender without control, apology without leverage, change without audience approval. Many refuse this moment. They blame, they deflect, they accuse the process itself, and in doing so, they turn exposure into permanent judgment, not because God closes the door, but because pride does. Exposure becomes the line where humility was still possible, but rejected publicly, just as it was rejected privately. For others, exposure becomes rescue. The collapse of image frees them from the exhausting labor of pretending. They finally tell the truth, not strategically but honestly. This path is painful, but it leads somewhere. God does not waste exposure. He uses it to separate those who will change from those who will cling to self-deception. This is why exposure feels final. It is not just about happened. It is about what will happen next. It marks the end of pretending. From this point forward, movement must be real, or it will be obvious that it is false. For you, understanding this matters because it clarifies your role. You are not meant to celebrate exposure. You are not meant to enforce repentance. You are not even meant to interpret it. Exposure is between God and the one exposed. Your responsibility ended long before this moment arrived. There is also justice for you here. Exposure validates your experience without requiring your testimony. It acknowledges harm without demanding your explanation. It says this was real without asking you to relive it. That alone is healing. Exposure is severe only to pride. To truth, it is alignment, and alignment always offers a choice. One last chance to step out of illusion and into reality. What they do with that chance is no longer connected to you. The invitation has been issued. The response will reveal everything. Endurance is often misunderstood because it does not look heroic in the moment. It looks like restraint. It looks like silence. It looks like choosing not to become sharp when wounded, not to become cruel when provoked, not to become desperate when misunderstood. But endurance is not weakness, it is filtration. It filters motives, intentions, and identities over time. And while you were enduring, something far more significant was happening than survival. Your character was being preserved while their disguise was quietly deteriorating. Character does not need performance. It does not need reinforcement. It remains consistent whether it is applauded or attacked. That consistency is what endurance protects. Every time you refused to retaliate, you denied your enemies a mirror. They wanted reaction because reaction would justify them. They wanted you to fracture so they could claim symmetry. But endurance refused symmetry. You stayed whole while they became increasingly artificial. Disguises require energy. They must be adjusted constantly to match circumstances. Lies must be recalibrated. Stories must be revised. Image must be defended. Endurance does none of this, it simply remains. Over time, this difference becomes impossible to ignore. The longer you stayed steady, the more effort they had to expend maintaining their appearance. And effort reveals strain. What makes endurance powerful is that it exposes contrast without confrontation. You did not call out deception, you outlasted it. You did not argue against falsehood, you stood quietly in truth. And truth, when left undisturbed, becomes immovable. The disguise, by comparison, begins to look fragile, over-designed, over-explained, over-defended. There is also an integrity that endurance preserves internally. When you do not compromise your values to defend yourself, You avoid becoming entangled in the very harm you suffer. Third, your inner life remains aligned. Your conscience stays clear. That clarity is not loud, but it is stabilizing. It allows you to remain grounded while others scramble to control perception. Your endurance also removed opportunities for them to redirect blame. Had you reacted emotionally, they could have reframed events around your response rather than their actions. Endurance denied them that escape. It kept focus where it belonged, on behavior rather than reaction. Over time, observers noticed this imbalance. One side remained consistent, the other kept shifting. Disguises thrive on urgency. They need immediate belief. Endurance introduces time, and time is unforgiving to pretense. As days pass, inconsistencies accumulate. The mask slips in small ways. Tone changes, contradictions emerge, stories stop aligning. You did not cause this. Endurance allowed it. There is also a deeper protection here. Endurance keeps you from internalizing false narratives. When accusations linger, there is a temptation to question oneself, but endurance anchored you. You knew who you were even when others tried to redefine you. That internal stability prevented erosion. You were not reshaped by distortion. The destruction of their disguise was not violent. It was gradual. It happened as reality refused to cooperate with their narrative, as outcomes contradicted intentions, as consequences followed patterns, and when exposure finally arrived, it did not feel sudden to those who had been paying attention. It felt overdue. Your endurance did not merely protect you. It testified without words. It created a record of consistency that no explanation could match. And in contrast to that consistency, their disguise could not survive. Not because you attacked it, but because endurance does what deception cannot. It lasts. Elevation pursued is fragile. Elevation earned through alignment is inevitable. When truth stands fully revealed, it rearranges value without announcement. It shifts perception without campaign. It reorders trust without instruction. And in that quiet reordering, elevation happens, not as promotion, but as recognition. This elevation does not feel dramatic because it is not performative. There is no moment of triumph, no reversal scene, no vindictive satisfaction. Instead, there is a gradual noticing. People listen differently. Opportunities appear without explanation. Respect settles where skepticism once lived. You do not rise by climbing. You rise because the ground beneath others gives way. What makes this elevation effortless is that it does not require correction. You are not elevated by proving someone wrong. You are elevated because the truth no longer competes with falsehood. When competition ends, alignment determines placement, and alignment favors consistency, integrity, and restraint. Defense is unnecessary because elevation rooted in truth does not provoke challenge. Challenges arise when positions are disputed. But when truth stands unobstructed, dispute dissolves. People may not articulate what changed, but they feel it. Trust returns instinctively. Confidence in you is restored without negotiation. Noise is absent because noise belongs to insecurity. Those who scramble to elevate themselves announce it. Those who are elevated by truth remain steady. You will notice that you do not feel the need to speak about the past, not because it did not matter, but because it no longer defines the present. The truth has already spoken. This elevation is also selective. Not everyone will acknowledge it. Some will avoid it. Some will remain silent out of discomfort. But silence no longer harms you. Recognition does not need consensus to be real. It only needs clarity, and clarity has already arrived. You may be surprised by who notices. Often it is not the loud observers, but the quiet ones. Those who watched carefully, those who withheld judgment, those who waited. They will adjust their posture toward you naturally. Trust does not require explanation when it feels justified. There is humility preserved in this process. Because you did not engineer the outcome, you are not tempted to control it. You are elevated without becoming inflated. That matters. Elevation that corrupts character is not elevation, it is delay before collapse. This elevation reinforces who you already are. You will also notice a shift in internal posture, less vigilance, less need to manage impressions, less awareness of being watched. Elevation rooted in truth creates safety. You no longer feel exposed because exposure has already occurred, and you were not the one exposed. This natural elevation is stable because it is not reactive. It does not depend on someone else's fall. Even though others were humbled, your rise is not built on their loss. It is built on alignment. That makes it durable. When truth stands revealed, it does not announce winners. It simply clarifies reality. And in that clarified reality, you are found standing where you always were. Only now, nothing false remains to obscure it. So let this moment settle in your spirit without fear or triumph. What has unfolded was never about spectacle, nor about proving a point to those who doubted you. It was about restoration, quiet, exact, and irreversible. Truth does not rush, but it does arrive. And when it stands fully revealed, it leaves no confusion about where you belong and what was never yours to carry. You were not spared because you were invisible. You were protected because you were seen. Every silent hour, every restrained response, every moment you chose integrity over impulse shaped an outcome larger than vindication. What God has done is not merely CT and injustice. He has re-established order. And in that order, you are no longer defined by what was done to you, but by what remained intact within you. Do not look back to measure who fell or how loudly the fall was heard. That accounting is not yours. Your task now is simpler and far more powerful, to walk forward unburdened. Justice has spoken, truth has settled. And what remains is not the echo of humiliation, but the quiet authority of alignment. Stand there without apology. Move without urgency. Speak only when peace invites you to. What needed to be said has already been said, without your voice, without your defense, without your effort. And that is how you will know it was never about you fighting to be seen, but about truth, refusing to stay hidden any longer.